real way.
Crosby is the front for Lord Rothschild.
Uh-huh.
Crosby was literally the last thing between Lord Rothschild and the uncovering of the bailout. And it's not just a scandal, it's a criminal scandal, because the bailout money was ultimately siphoned offshore to Rothschild Assurance.
Yep.
And I think that the questions that need to be answered most urgently by Andrew Bailey and his ilk are: where did the bailout money go that Hbos got? And why did Rothschild Assurance, the longest standing directorship of Jacob Rothschild, why was that wound up shortly after Liz Watson laid the allegations that the money was being siphoned offshore?
What sort of time period is this?
We're talking about the exact time period that the crash was orchestrated, from 2006 to 2008.
Uh-huh.
When was Crosby chairman?
Don't know.
Well, he was chairman until 2006.
Uh-huh.
What did he move on to? He moved on to the chair of the FSA, during which time my research unearthed at least 3,500 criminal complaints made worldwide against Hbos during his tenure as CEO, and he was allowed, as chairman of the FSA, to quash all of those investigations so that they never came anywhere near him or Hbos or Lord Rothschild.
And what other names are involved?
What are the names?
Other names around Crosby that were orchestrating this?
Willie Sutherland, who was named in the film, was integral to it all. He very much like in Liz's case and in others, he was posing as someone who was just trying to restructure finance when really they were deconstructing
He was at
businesses.
Hbos.
He was at Bank of Scotland. He still is at Lloyds, but he was a director of Bank of Scotland all the way through Crosby's tenure. So basically they were targeting high net worth individuals.
Yep.
And they were taking all their funds.
And that's with the Vavasor.
With the Vavasor, they were claiming they were creating fake accounts in their customers' names offshore, and making at least 4 times the value of the mortgages that they were writing with their customers.
Were they always fake names, or were they?
They were using
shadow banking?
They were using real names under a fake power of attorney that they purported that is granted in the standard mortgage conditions in every UK mortgage. And that power of attorney does not actually exist, because it cannot exist without a standalone power of attorney deed granted by the donor.
So with Liz's, it was an investment scheme, and they was offered this great investment scheme, and then a charge placed on their property, which later the bank then obviously came for.
Yes, yeah. So what they're doing under that purported power of attorney is they're making many times the value of the mortgage over, and then coming back for the principal plus compound interest for 25 years. However, what Crosby did for Lord Rothschild is create an environment that was so aggressive that they were actively selling portfolios of securitized mortgages to investors by bracketing them in certain types, and the prime type of mortgage that they were selling in these packages were the type what they estimated to be 30% of their mortgage book, which they estimated would go into default within the first 3 years.
So the mortgages they were selling, was that such as Liz's mortgage, or were they selling Liz an interest in other people's mortgages?
They were selling interests in high net worth portfolios.
Right. And who were the people who were the victims of those portfolios? Was that Liz, or was it other people
It was
they
Liz
were buying
and
into?
It was Liz and all those other people. They all qualified as any high net worth individual was targeted by Bank of Scotland and Hbos.
And they were encouraged in with sort of 1 to 5% returns per month.
Yes.
To bait them in.
Yes.
And then encouraged to put more money in and bring friends in.
Yes.
To exaggerate it.
Yes.
And I think with Liz, the family and friends was about 3.5 million. So, which is very similar to the Integrity scam.
It is.
Which Ian Stamps at the Brunt for. Very decent guy. And what Ian was doing, he was building the coding, staff of 120. They were facilitators for Lloyds, Hbos, when Crosby was there. And Crosby also had interest in the FSA. And what Ian was then punting was in second-hand endowments, second-hand life policies. They were getting sold on, people were tempted in, similar to Liz's. And then what they were told was that their investments had dropped 60% of value. So a lot of people surrendered them. A lot of people will then come after and bankrupt, and because there were assignments and charges on their properties for the further credit line, they were then taken down. But I think in Ian's case, it was about 400 million. And in Ian's case, he was taken into the FSA, and he was basically threatened, if all this comes out, it could be 2 years in jail.
Well, it should be a lot longer than 2 years in jail for an awful lot of bankers, but also an awful lot of regulators, so-called, who they couldn't even get away with the defence that they'd been asleep on the job, that they'd just been negligent.
So they're obviously intently on doing this. But I mean, so what should be the killer question for Andrew Bailey?
Why is it that Carmel Butler presented all the evidence before Parliament that proved that there was no such thing as toxic debt, the alleged cause of the Northern Rock crash, and the subsequent bailout for all the banks?
Yeah.
And what happened to the bailout money?
Yeah.
What happened to it? And also, how would he explain that there was never any time that any of the banks that were bailed out stopped writing mortgages and making the same amounts and generating more profits and paying more bonuses? How come that continued? Or at least the bonuses were mooted for a very short period of time. They were kept lower than before, but secretly there was the backhanders were flying.
And also, why did the banks need the bailout? Because they don't lend. Any lending was coming from the borrowers.
So in other words, the bailout was an enormous, elaborate fraud.
And where did that money go?
Exactly, the bailout money was siphoned offshore, and we know the evidence that Liz has amassed and that I have added to the pile suggests that Crosby was the front for Rothschild Assurance, that it was all
under St James Place.
Under St James Place. That's why he was given, as a parting gift in 2006 from Bank of Scotland, the trade name of Bank of Scotland, which he held for at least 2 years. At least 2 years.
And what year was that?
I believe that the year that he was given the trade name was 2006. But there's also evidence that he still had it in 2010 in the shape of our case, because we issued proceedings not against Bank of Scotland, we issued them against James Crosby, phone on behalf of Bank of Scotland.
So while he had it, funds went in, and then funds went out, and then he gave it back.
So on paper, they were paying Bank of Scotland all the same things as before. There was nothing really that changed, yet he was in control of the trade name, and that's how he managed to create the front to siphon off
government-funded money.
Siphon off everything to Rothschild Assurance. Now, within 6 months of Liz making these allegations public and sending a vast amount of emails to various members of government and law enforcement and the civil service, 6 months subsequent to this, we know for a fact that she was visited by an agent of Lord Rothschild and asked to give up what she was pursuing. Now, when she refused to do this, it's obvious that the state, the establishment, and the banks, they got together, and if they're not indeed the same party, but all the parties involved got together and they conspired not only to gag her in the courts with civil restraint, but they conspired to follow through on the theft of her family's properties.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Is that enough?